said, his smile fading. Patricia looked him up and down, taking in his casual clothes and work boots. Her expression said everything. She'd made up her mind about exactly what kind of person he was. "Listen," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Renters like you need to understand that Oak Ridge has standards. I'll need to speak with your landlord immediately about these boxes cluttering the front yard and that vehicle." Alex could have corrected her right then. He could have explained that he wasn't renting. He'd bought the house outright after his company had an especially good year. He could have mentioned that he actually owned several other properties and helped finance many homes in neighborhoods just like this one. But something made him hold his tongue. Instead, he just nodded politely and said, "I'll make sure everything is cleaned up today." Patricia gave a curt nod and turned to leave, already making notes on her clipboard. As she walked away, Alex went back to unpacking his boxes, a small smile playing on his lips. Something told him this wasn't going to be the last run-in with Patricia Wellington. Alex settled into his new home over the next couple of weeks. He'd painted the home office a soft blue, hung family photos in the hallway, and even planted some tomatoes in the backyard. Things were going well, except for his interactions with Patricia Wellington. It seemed like every other day, Alex would find a brightly colored notice stuck to his door. Sometimes it was yellow, sometimes pink. Once it was an angry red, but the message was always the same. He was breaking some rule in the thick HOA handbook. On Tuesday, Patricia left a notice about his truck being parked on the street overnight. All vehicles must be stored in garages between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. She'd written in perfect handwriting, with the relevant page number from the rulebook noted at the bottom. When Alex checked the actual rules, he found that overnight street parking was perfectly allowed on weekdays. The restriction only applied to weekends, but trying to explain this to Patricia was like talking to a brick wall. "Perhaps you misread the guidelines," she said when he caught her inspecting his mailbox the following day. "As a renter, it's understandable that you wouldn't be familiar with our standards." "I've read them cover to cover," Alex replied calmly. "And by the way, this mailbox design was approved by the HOA board last week." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "I find that hard to believe. I'm on the board, and I don't recall approving anything for this address." She pulled out her phone and took several photos of the mailbox from different angles, muttering about documentation and violations. The trash bin incident was what really showed Alex what he was dealing with. He'd put his bins out Thursday evening for Friday morning pickup, just like everyone else on the street. But at 9 p.m. sharp, there was a knock at his door. Patricia stood there with her clipboard and a flashlight, which she shined directly at the bins. "Trash receptacles cannot be placed curbside until 5 a.m. on collection day," she announced. "Everyone else has their bins out," Alex pointed out, gesturing down the street where at least a dozen identical bins lined the curb. "I'm addressing those violations separately," Patricia said stiffly. "But since you're new here, I thought I'd give you a personal reminder." Word spread quickly through the neighborhood about Patricia's fixation on the new renter. Some neighbors started giving Alex sympathetic looks, but nobody stepped in to help. Patricia had been running the HOA with an iron fist for years, and most people just tried to stay off her radar. One evening, Alex was grilling in his backyard when his next-door neighbor, Tom, peeked over the fence. "Smells good," Tom said with a friendly nod. "Better not let the HOA police catch you using that charcoal grill, though. She'll probably claim the smoke is reducing property values." Alex laughed. "Is she always like this?" Tom sighed. "Patricia? Yeah, pretty much, but she seems especially focused on you for some reason, maybe because you're renting instead of owning. She's big on that distinction." "I'm not actually renting," Alex said, flipping a burger. "I bought the place." Tom's eyebrows shot up. "No kidding. Might want to let her know that. She keeps telling everyone at the neighborhood Facebook group that the new renter doesn't respect our community standards." Alex just shook his head. He didn't really care what Patricia thought, and he wasn't one to brag about his finances. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Alex wasn't just an ordinary homeowner. His mortgage company had recently bought a large portfolio of loans from First Regional Bank when they were struggling to stay afloat. He hadn't even gone through all the paperwork yet, but the purchase included hundreds of mortgages across several upscale neighborhoods in the area. Somewhere in his office was a stack of files that probably contained some very interesting information about his neighbors. But for now, Alex was content to let Patricia continue her campaign. He turned back to his grill, wondering what rule she would invent tomorrow. The flyer about the monthly HOA meeting had been stuck to Alex's door with a smiley face sticker. It wasn't from Patricia, that much was obvious. The flyer mentioned bringing snacks to share and ended with, "Hope to see you there, Patricia's." Notices never included hope. Alex hadn't planned on going to the meeting. He had work to catch up on, and the thought of spending his Thursday evening discussing lawn height regulations didn't sound appealing. But after 3 weeks of finding violation notices taped to his door almost daily, he decided it might be time to meet the rest of the board. The community center was a small brick building next to the neighborhood playground. By the time Alex arrived, the parking lot was nearly full. Inside, about 30 people sat in folding chairs arranged in rows. A long table at the front held 5 people, the HOA board members, he assumed. Patricia sat in the center, her posture perfect, a stack of papers neatly arranged in front of her. Alex slipped into an empty chair in the back row. As he sat down, he noticed Patricia spotting him. She leaned over to whisper something to the woman beside her, who turned to look at him with undisguised curiosity. The meeting started with standard business, discussion about the community, pool opening next month, plans for the summer block party, and a debate about whether to replace the faded stop sign at the neighborhood entrance. Alex half listened while checking emails on his phone. Next item, new violation notices issued this month, announced the balding man at the end of the table, adjusting his glasses. Patricia, you have the floor. Patricia stood up, shoulders squared. Thank you, Howard. We've issued 17 notices for various infractions. Most have been resolved, but I'd like to discuss ongoing issues with the property at 157 Oak Ridge Drive. Alex looked up, suddenly paying attention. That was his address. The renter continues to disregard our standards, Patricia continued. Despite multiple warnings about trash receptacles, unapproved fixtures, and street parking violations, a middle-aged woman in the front row turned around, scanning the room until she spotted Alex. She gave him a sympathetic look. Perhaps we should table this discussion until we've had a chance to speak with the property owner, suggested Howard. Has anyone been able to contact the landlord? Patricia sniffed. I've left 3 messages. No response yet. Alex raised his hand. The room fell quiet as people noticed. Yes? Howard asked, peering over his glasses. You have a question? Alex stood up. I just wanted to introduce myself properly. I'm Alexander Reeves. I live at 157 Oak Ridge Drive. Patricia cut in. As I've been saying, we need to speak with the property owner, not the tenant. I am the owner, Alex said evenly. I purchased the house from the Bradleys last month. There's no landlord to contact. The room went completely silent. Patricia's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Howard shuffled through some papers. He's right, Patricia. Our records show Mr. Reeves purchased the property outright. The sale closed on April 15th. Patricia's cheeks flushed pink. There must be some mistake. He doesn't, She gestured vaguely at Alex's jeans and casual button-down shirt, as if his clothes proved he couldn't possibly be a homeowner. There's no mistake, Howard said, looking uncomfortable. Mr. Reeves, we apologize for the confusion. Welcome to Oak Ridge Estates. Several people turned to look at Patricia, whose face had gone from pink to red. Well, she said, recovering quickly. Ownership doesn't exempt anyone from following the rules. And there have been multiple violations that need to be addressed. An older woman with silver hair stood up from the second row. Patricia, I live 2 doors down from Mr. Reeves, and I haven't noticed any issues with his property. In fact, he power washed his driveway last weekend, which is more than I can say for some other houses on our street. Several people nodded. In agreement. Patricia looked like she'd swallowed something sour. We can discuss specific concerns after the meeting, Howard said diplomatically. Now, let's move on to the next item, the proposal for updated landscaping around the neighborhood. Entrance. As the meeting continued, Alex noticed several neighbors glancing his way with newfound interest. When they took a short break for refreshments, 3 different people came over to introduce themselves. No one mentioned Patricia directly, but their friendly welcome felt like an apology for her behavior. Patricia stayed at the front table during the break, rearranging her papers and avoiding eye contact with everyone. For the first time since moving in, Alex felt like he might actually enjoy living in Oak Ridge Estates, as long as he could stay out of Patricia's crosshairs. Monday morning came too quickly. Alex's alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., and he groaned as he reached to silence it. After hitting snooze twice, he finally dragged himself out of bed and into the shower. By 6:45, he was in his car with a travel mug of coffee, heading downtown to his office. Reeves Financial Holdings occupied the entire 4th floor of a glass building overlooking the river. Alex had started the company 7 years ago with just himself and 1 assistant. Now he had 28 employees and a corner office with a view that still made him pause sometimes, wondering how he'd gotten so lucky. "Morning, Lisa," he called to his assistant as he walked in. "Anything urgent I need to know about?" Lisa handed him a stack of pink message slips. 3 clients called about refinancing. The bank needs your signature on those acquisition papers. By noon, and your mom called to remind you about dinner on Sunday. Alex sighed. The bank papers, that's the first regional portfolio we bought last month, right? The distressed mortgages? That's the one, Lisa nodded. About 400 loans total. The files are on your desk, and I've uploaded everything to the system. Jenny organized them by zip code to make it easier to assign to our loan officers. Thanks. I'll start going through them today. In his office, Alex settled behind his desk and opened his laptop. The first regional acquisition had been a good deal. The bank had been eager to offload their underperforming loans, and Alex's company had the resources to work with borrowers on manageable payment plans rather than rushing to foreclosure. He pulled up the spreadsheet sorting all the loans by neighborhood. Might as well start close to home, he thought, clicking on the Oak Ridge Estates folder. There were only 8 mortgages in his neighborhood, not surprising since many of the homes were owned outright by wealthy retirees. Alex scrolled through the list, not recognizing most of the names. Then he stopped, finger hovering over the touchpad. Wellington Patricia, 142 Oak Ridge Drive. He clicked on the file, and Patricia's loan details filled his screen. It wasn't just her Oak Ridge home. There were 3 properties listed under her name. Her main residence plus 2 smaller homes in Riverdale Heights, a less expensive neighborhood about 20 minutes away. Alex leaned back in his chair, surprised. Patricia owned rental properties. Given how she'd treated him, the irony was almost too perfect. Digging deeper into the file, Alex noticed something concerning. The 2 Riverdale properties were marked in red, 3 months behind on payments. Patricia had been making partial payments on and off, but according to the notes from First Regional, she'd cited problem tenants and unexpected repairs as reasons for falling behind. "Hey, Jenny," Alex called to his loan review specialist, who was passing by his office. "Can you pull up the payment history on these properties?" He turned his screen so she could see the addresses. Jenny tapped a few keys on her tablet. "Oh, those are from the First Regional bundle? Let me see." Her fingers flew over the screen. "Yeah, looks like a pattern here. The owner makes a partial payment when they get a warning letter, then misses the next month entirely. Been going on almost a year." "What about the primary residence?" Alex asked, pointing to Patricia's Oak Ridge address. "That one's current, but only because she refinanced it twice in the last 3 years to pull out equity. Looks like she's been using money from that to juggle the other properties." Jenny shook her head. "Not a sustainable strategy. The loan-to-value ratio on her primary is now at 85%. Alex thanked Jenny and sat quietly after she left, thinking. Patricia Wellington wasn't the wealthy, financially secure homeowner she pretended to be. She was over-leveraged and struggling to maintain appearances, using equity from her main home to keep her investment properties afloat. Properties that were now his company's responsibility. The woman who had been looking down her nose at him assuming he was just a renter who couldn't possibly belong in her exclusive neighborhood, was actually drowning in debt. Alex didn't take pleasure in other people's financial troubles. Every day, he worked with folks who had fallen on hard times, and his company prided itself on finding solutions that kept people in their homes whenever possible. But as he stared at Patricia's file, he couldn't help but think about her clipboard, her condescending smile, and all those violation notices. Sometimes life had a way of teaching humility to those who needed it most. He picked up his phone to call the loan servicing department. It was time to send out standard notices to all the delinquent accounts from First Regional, including Patricia Wellington's. Patricia's garden club meeting was going perfectly. 6 neighborhood women sat in her sunroom, admiring her prize-winning orchids while sipping tea from delicate china cups that had belonged to her grandmother. This was Patricia's favorite day of the month, when everyone came to her house and saw firsthand how a proper Oak Ridge resident lived. "I've been using this special fertilizer mix," Patricia explained, gently touching one purple bloom. "It's imported from Hawaii. Very exclusive." The doorbell rang, interrupting her explanation. "Excuse me, ladies," Patricia said with a tight smile. "Help yourselves to more scones. I'll just be a moment." She wasn't expecting anyone, and Patricia hated surprises. When she opened the door and found a courier holding an envelope, her annoyance only grew. "Patricia Wellington?" the young man asked. "Yes, that's me. This requires your signature." He held out an electronic pad. Patricia signed quickly, took the envelope, and closed the door before her guests could see. The return address made her pause. Reeves Financial Holdings. She didn't recognize the name, but anything with financial in the title rarely brought good news. In the privacy of her kitchen, Patricia tore open the envelope. Inside was a formal letter regarding her 2 rental properties in Riverdale Heights. The letter stated that First Regional Bank had sold her mortgages to Reeves Financial, and due to continued delinquency, payment arrangements must be made within 30 days or foreclosure proceedings would begin. Patricia's hands trembled as she read the letter twice. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when she'd finally gotten a reliable tenant in one of the properties. She just needed a few more months to catch up. What worried her most was the thought of her neighbors finding out. No one in Oak Ridge knew about her financial struggles. She'd been careful to maintain the appearance of success even as the bills piled up. The rental properties were supposed to be her retirement plan, but repair costs and vacancies had turned them into a money eater. She looked at the contact information at the bottom of the letter. Alexander Reeves, CEO. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. Patricia folded the letter and slipped it into her pocket. She would deal with this later. Right now, she had guests to impress. After the garden club left, Patricia poured herself a large glass of wine and called the number on the letter. It went to voicemail. She left a message explaining that there had been a misunderstanding and asked for a call back. 3 days passed with no response. Patricia called again, leaving increasingly desperate messages. Finally, on Friday evening, she decided more direct action was needed. The address for Reeves Financial was downtown, but their office would be closed by now. Patricia pulled up the county property records on her computer and searched for Alexander Reeves. There had to be a home address she could use. When the search results appeared, Patricia nearly knocked over her wine glass. According to county records, Alexander Reeves owned 157 Oak Ridge Drive, just across the street from her. The new neighbor she'd been harassing about HOA violations for weeks was the same person who now controlled her mortgages. "This can't be right," she whispered, checking the record again. But there it was, clear as day. Alexander Reeves had purchased the property 2 months ago. Patricia grabbed her keys and the letter. She marched across the street, anger and fear fighting for control inside her. The porch light was on, and she could see movement through the front windows. She pressed the doorbell and waited, heart pounding. The door opened, and there stood Alex, casual in jeans and a t-shirt, looking surprised to see her. "Patricia, what brings you by?" She thrust the letter toward him. "Is this some kind of joke?" Her voice came out higher than she intended. Alex glanced at the letter and recognition dawned on his face. No joke at all. Please, come in. Patricia hesitated, then stepped inside. This was the first time she'd been in this house since the Bradleys moved out. She was surprised by how warm and inviting it looked now. You bought my mortgages, she said flatly. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know until this week, Alex replied, leading her to the living room. My company acquired a portfolio of loans from First Regional Bank last month. Yours were among them. And now you're threatening foreclosure? Patricia's voice cracked slightly. Not threatening, Alex corrected. The letter outlines standard procedures for delinquent accounts. I'm simply following protocol. You can't do this, Patricia said, desperation creeping into her voice. Those properties are my retirement plan. Alex looked at her steadily. Actually, I can, but unlike you, I don't believe in making assumptions about people or treating them with disrespect based on those assumptions. Patricia sank onto his couch, suddenly feeling very small. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent weeks looking down on this man, believing him to be just a renter, when all along he held the keys to her financial future. News travels fast in small communities, and Oak Ridge Estates was no exception. By the next morning, whispers about Patricia's confrontation with Alex had already begun to spread. No one knew the details, just that Patricia had been seen storming across the street to Alex's house and leaving an hour later looking shaken. Patricia noticed the change immediately. At the grocery store, conversation stopped when she walked down an aisle. At the community mailboxes, neighbors who normally chatted with her suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Even her friend Diane, who usually called every Saturday morning, was strangely silent. By Monday, Patricia couldn't stand it anymore. She called an emergency HOA board meeting, claiming they needed to discuss hostile actions against a board member. The meeting was set for Wednesday evening at the community center. Patricia arrived early, arranging her papers neatly and practicing what she would say. She would frame Alex as the villain, a predatory lender targeting vulnerable homeowners. She would rally the neighborhood against him. It was her only hope of maintaining her position of authority. But as people filed into the room, she sensed something was off. Instead of the usual 20 or so attendees, almost 50 residents squeezed into the small space. They spoke in hushed tones, glancing her way with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disapproval. Let's call this meeting to order, Howard said, tapping his gavel. Patricia has requested this emergency session to discuss what she describes as hostile actions against a board member. Patricia, the floor is yours. Patricia stood, smoothing her skirt nervously. Thank you, Howard. As many of you know, I've served on this board for 7 years, always with the best interests of our community in mind. She took a deep breath. Recently, Mr. Reeves has engaged in what I can only describe as financial intimidation. Excuse me, interrupted Linda from 2 streets over. Could you be more specific about what you mean by financial intimidation? Patricia hesitated. Well, that is his company, has threatened foreclosure on certain properties. Your rental properties? Asked Tom, Alex's next-door neighbor. The ones in Riverdale Heights that you haven't been maintaining properly? Patricia felt the blood drain from her face. How did you... My sister lives in Riverdale, Tom explained. She's been complaining about an absentee landlord who never fixes anything. Imagine my surprise when she showed me a picture of the house, and I recognized your car in the driveway during one of your rare visits. Murmurs spread through the room. Patricia looked around desperately. This isn't about my investment properties. This is about Mr. Reeves abusing his position. What position? Howard asked. From what I understand, his company legally purchased loans from a bank. Is that incorrect? Patricia opened her mouth, then closed it again. She couldn't deny the facts without outright lying. The back door opened and Alex walked in. Unlike Patricia in her formal blazer and pearls, he wore a simple button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He nodded politely to several neighbors as he made his way to an empty chair. Mr. Reeves, Howard acknowledged him. Since your name has come up, would you like to address these concerns? Alex looked thoughtful. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to discuss any client's specific financial situation in public. My company has policies about privacy. He glanced at Patricia. But I will say that we try to work with all our clients facing financial hardship. My door is always open for a professional conversation about payment options. The simple statement, delivered without drama or accusation, made Patricia's planned speech seem ridiculous by comparison. Several people nodded approvingly at Alex's professional approach. Well then, Howard said, unless there's evidence of any actual HOA violations or community concerns, I think we should move on. I have a concern, said elderly Mrs. Cooper from the front row. For 3 years I've been getting notices about my rose bushes being 2 inches taller than regulation, while other violations on certain properties, she glanced meaningfully at Patricia's house across the street, have been completely ignored. This opened the floodgates. One by one, neighbors stood up to share stories of Patricia's selective enforcement and bullying behavior over the years. The broken fence she'd overlooked at her friend Diane's house, the unapproved paint color she'd allowed on another board member's shed, the harshness with which she'd treated new residents, especially those she deemed not our kind of people. Patricia sat frozen, watching 7 years of carefully. 6 months passed, bringing changes to Oak Ridge Estates that nobody could have predicted. The new HOA board, with Howard as president and Alex as treasurer, had transformed the neighborhood. The old rule book, a 60-page monster full of restrictions, had been trimmed down to 12 reasonable pages focused on safety and property maintenance rather than control. The community center hosted weekly events now. Everything from cooking classes to movie nights. Children played freely on front lawns without fear of violation notices about noise levels. Gardens became more diverse, with native plants replacing the mandatory uniform landscaping of the past. For Alex, life had settled into a pleasant routine. His business continued to thrive, and he'd found genuine friendships among his neighbors. Tom from next door had become a regular grilling buddy, and they'd built a shared fire pit between their backyards where neighbors often gathered on cool evenings. As for Patricia, she'd kept to herself after the meeting. Alex had worked out a refinancing plan for her properties through his company, and she'd sold 2 of her 3 rental homes to pay down her debts. He'd seen the for sale signs go up and come down, but they hadn't spoken directly since their meeting in his living room months ago. One Saturday morning in early fall, Alex was kneeling in the dirt at the neighborhood entrance, planting bulbs that would bloom in spring. The old HOA had hired landscapers for this, but the new board had suggested community volunteer days instead, saving money while building connections between neighbors. He wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a smudge of dirt behind. The morning was cool, but the digging was hard work. He'd been at it for 2 hours and had planted over 100 bulbs already. Need some help? Alex looked up, surprised to see Patricia standing there. She wore jeans. He'd never seen her in anything but skirts or dress pants before, and a simple blue sweater. She looked different, smaller somehow, without her clipboard and pearl necklace. Sure, he said after a moment. I've got about 200 more to go. Patricia knelt down beside him, not seeming to care about the dirt on her knees. I used to do this with my mother, she said quietly, taking a bulb from the bag. She loved tulips. Said they were the most hopeful flowers because they pushed through the cold ground after winter. Alex nodded, not sure what to say. They worked in silence for a while, falling into a rhythm. Dig hole, place bulb, cover, pat down, move on. I got a job, Patricia said suddenly. Part-time at the garden center. They needed someone who knows about plants. That's great, Alex said, genuinely pleased. Seems like a good fit. Patricia planted another bulb before speaking again. I wanted to thank you for not foreclosing, for giving me a chance to fix things. Alex shrugged. That's what my company does. We try to keep people in their homes whenever possible. Still, you could have made things much worse for me. After how I treated you, nobody would have blamed you. A young couple walking by waved to Alex and he waved back. Patricia noticed the friendly exchange. They like you, she observed. Everyone does. I'm just being myself, Alex said. No clipboard required. To his surprise, Patricia laughed. A genuine sound without the sharp edge he'd come to expect from her. I was awful, wasn't I? She asked, but didn't wait for an answer. My husband left 3 years ago, cleaned out our savings. The rental properties were supposed to save me from having to admit I couldn't afford to live here anymore. She planted another bulb with extra force. I was so scared of losing my place here that I became someone I don't even recognize anymore. Alex considered her words. Fear does that sometimes. Makes us build walls to keep others out. They continued planting in comfortable silence until Patricia spoke again. The neighborhood looks better now, happier. I didn't see it before, how my rules were making everyone miserable. Alex smiled. It's never too late to plant something new. He handed her another tulip bulb. Want to come to the community dinner tonight? Tom's making his famous chili. Patricia hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. As the morning went on, other neighbors joined them in the dirt. Some did double takes seeing Patricia working alongside Alex, but no one commented. Children ran around them, occasionally stopping to help plant a bulb or two before racing off again. By noon, the entrance garden was filled with promises of spring flowers, hidden beneath the soil but waiting for their time to emerge. Patricia stood up, brushing dirt from her jeans, and looked at what they'd accomplished. Sometimes you have to start over, she said almost to herself, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Alex nodded, understanding she wasn't just talking about gardens.